learning Tzadik Amud Beis. We're starting from the Mishnah in Tzadik Amud Aleph. It's the last Mishnah discussing the sizes of different objects that you remove on Shabbos from Rishus HaYachid to Rishus HaRabim. What's the minimum size that's significant and therefore a person will be chayiv for? So the Mishnah starts off with a different idea, not the idea of the sizes, but a bit of a side note, seemingly. Hamaitzi kupas haroichlin, one who removes from Rishus HaYachid a box of peddlers that had a lot of small compartments of different spices, different perfumes. They used to sell things in small quantity, so they had a large box with a lot of compartments of different objects. Although it has many types, many different objects, he's only chayiv one korban chadas. Now, seemingly, it's a bit of a question, what is the big chiddush? We know that even if you went in and out a million times on Shabbos, and you removed one object and another object and another object, then you're chayiv only one chatas, because you did only one aveira of haitzah mirshus l'rshus, one malacha. So why is the Mishnah telling us a big chiddush that if he carried one box outside with a lot of compartments, I'm only chayiv one korban chatas? So Teisus asked that question. So he says that usually, let's say if I carried one object and I came back and I carried another object, and then after Shabbos I remembered about one of those transformations and I forgot about the rest of them. And whatever, I put aside the korban chatas, and then I remembered another time. We had before whether putting aside the korban chatas or knowing alone divides it. In this box, if I found out in the middle on one of those objects and then I found out about the other object, it does not divide it. Because since I removed it in one large box, it's considered one action. If I remembered one bit, I remember the whole thing. So I'm always chayiv only one korban chatas. Interesting why this is brought in the middle of the year, when we're still in the middle of discussing the sizes of singular objects. I'm not sure. So the Mishnah continues to the last example of a singular object. What size is the minimum? Zer'oinei gino, seeds of vegetables. Pachis mikegri geris. They possibly can be eaten, but very typically are removed in order to plant them. And so since they are useful, even not for eating, therefore it says it's pachis mikegri geris. The typical size for food is the size of a dried fig. However, these seeds, that they have another use besides eating, so their size is a bit less than a dried fig. It does not say exactly how much. Some assume that it's around a kazayis, the size of an olive. That's the size, since they're significant, even less than the size of typical food. Rabbi Yehuda, he says, 1 second, it's seeds meant for planting. Then why are you only minimizing it a bit less than a dried fig? Much less is also significant. Chamisha zera kishuim, 5 seeds of kishuim. Today it's typically translated as zucchini or courgette, but some translate it as cucumbers. So seeds of cucumbers, 5 is significant. Shnayim zera diluyim, 2 seeds of diluyim. So today typically translated as pumpkins, but they didn't really have that those days. So they translate it usually as butternut squash, and it's something similar. And so 2 of them are considered significant. Shnayim zera poila mitzri, 2 seeds for Egyptian beans. I'm sorry, I didn't read it right. Rabbi Yehuda saying chamisha. I didn't read it right. Chamisha. 5 garden seeds are considered significant. Zera kishuyim. If it's from cucumbers, that's more significant. Shnayim. 2 seeds are already significant. Zera diluyim. If it's from butternut squash, Shnayim. 2 are already significant. Zera poila mitzri. If it's from these Egyptian beans, Shnayim. 2 are significant. So all these exceptions, 2 are significant, and all other types of garden vegetables then 5 seeds are significant, which is much less than a bit less than a dried fig. So that's the machlokes. Fine. Then the Gemara says, Chagov Chai Tor, a kosher live locust, a kosher live grasshopper. Well, they knew then the different types which are kosher. Today we don't have the Masechta by most of us, but they have then the Masechta. So if you remove a live kosher locust, doesn't matter what size it is. It's already something significant, as we'll see soon why. Actually, Rashi already mentions because people used to play with it. That was like a pet. Children used to play with it as a pet, and so that was something they would put aside to play with. Mace, if it's dead, kigre again, it's kosher. It doesn't have to have any shchita. The vela is kosher, so it's like any food. The size of a dried fig is significant. Tzipoides kromim, that's a specific type of kosher locust, which we don't know today which it is. I mean, if we would know which kosher locust. Now, we obviously cannot identify the specific types because we don't know which locust is kosher. Bein chaya, bein mesa, whether it's alive, whether it's dead, kol shuhu, the smallest amount is also significant. Why? If it's food, it should need the size of a dried fig. Shematzniyin oisel l'refuah. It was also used for healing, and therefore even a smaller amount is put aside. Rabbi Yehuda Imer, he says a non-kosher locust, the smallest size is also significant. Why? They put it aside for a child. They play with non-kosher locusts as well, not just for kosher locusts. I don't know if the idea of only playing with kosher animals, the first source that we have for that is in the Kava Yosher. Never quotes from there. It's much later. But I guess in the time of the Mishnah it wasn't yet an accepted thing, so they used to play with non-kosher animals as well. The Gemara will explain why Tanakama disagrees and he says he shouldn't. But either way, Rabbi Yehuda says a non-kosher locust is also a good pet, and the smallest size is significant. Okay, so let's go back to the beginning of the Mishnah. Vegetables, garden vegetables. According to Tanakama, you have to have seeds a bit less than the size of a dried fig. According to Rabbi Yehuda, most of the garden vegetables, you have to have 5 seeds. And for very specific ones, which are more important, 2 seeds are good enough. Now, the problem is we find in another place that 1 vegetable is significant. Now, 1 vegetable grows from 1 seed. So seemingly 1 seed should be significant. It makes 1 vegetable. Where do we see that? Viramini, there's a contradiction to this. We had this contradiction before. Zemel v'choil hadak. If one removes from Rishus HaYochid thin fertilizer or thin sand, which can be used as fertilizer. So kedei, it has to be the right size, the zabel, to treat. Kelach shel kruv, 1 cabbage, do Rabbi Kiva. V'chachomim meimim kedei the zabel kreisha, 1 leek. Fine, but it's 1 vegetable. 1 vegetable is from 1 seed, that's already significant. Amar Papa makes a big difference. Hadazariya, if I planted it already and it grew a big cabbage or a long leek, it's significant. But hadalaizariya, until I planted it, to take 1 seed and to plant it from 1 leek or from 1 cabbage to come out, no. A person does not work hard to transfer 1 seed to plant. I mean, it's a seed. Yes, I know it's gonna be a cabbage. It's gonna be a leek, but it's not. It's a seed. I don't look at it as significant. When I have a bunch of them and I plant them, that's already considered something which I would put an effort to do, and otherwise I won't put an effort. Fine? Zena kishuim, the seeds of kishuim, either cucumbers or zucchini, tan rabon, hamoitzi gar'inim. So it depends. It depends either, I guess, if they're dry and therefore they're fit for planting, or if it's in a place that the typical behavior there is to plant it, then shtayim, then the sizes, as the Mishnah said, 2 seeds are good enough. But im la'achila, if it's a place that people eat it, then kimloi pi chazir. Then, since they would also typically feed it, they wouldn't necessarily only save it for humans. It's not such a regular food that people have this vegetable seeds. They don't usually eat it on its own. They could, but they don't typically eat it. But they would feed it to pigs. Now, Jews are not allowed to raise pigs. Chazirim are not allowed. So, why would it be significant? He could sell it to a goy. A goy would feed it to his chazir. Fine. So it's the size to feed a chazir. That's already considered significant. How much would he eat? Achas. One seed is already something for him. He has food all over. He just wants to taste something new. So you give him something new. Im lahasik, if you want to use it as a fuel, it's dry and you want to use it as a fuel, so the typical size is k'dei lavashil beitza kala, to fry this the size of a dried fig from a chicken's egg. Im l'cheshbon, they would use seeds to count with it. They want to count certain objects. They put aside one seed for this, one seed for that, and I count the seeds afterwards, and I say how many of each objects I have. So if it's for counting, shtayim, the least you would count is 2 objects. Acherim, Ibn Meir says, no. You don't need to have anything to remember to count 2. Chomish, the smallest number that you would need something to remind you is 5. Fine. Okay. One who transfers 2 hairs, 2 threads, miznavasus, from the tail of a horse, miznava, part of the tail of a cow, chayiv. Why? They use it for nets. They make nets to trap birds. They would make it from the hairs of the tail of the horse, the tail of a cow, and therefore even 2 threads, 2 hairs are already considered significant. Mikshor mikosha shel chazir. They would make threads from the spine. By a chazir's spine, there's some threads that you can make, harder threads that you could use also. Achas. One of them is already significant because they would put it, when they would sew, they would want to make in the beginning a bit of a thicker thread in order to push it through the clothing a bit better. So they would use that thick thread they took from the spine of the chazir, they would put it on the top, and it would help them sew. Suri dekel, they would have the leaves, palm leaves. They would peel them when it becomes hard already. After the lulav opens up and then it becomes harder like branches, then they would peel it and then make baskets out of it. So if you're taking those leaves, shtayim, 2 are significant because you could start weaving the basket. You could start with 2. You can already start doing something with it. Toiri dekel, there's like a vine growing around the palm tree, like a thin thread growing around the palm tree. Achas, 1 is already significant, and the Rashi says he doesn't know exactly for what. Others say that they would somehow they would stuff the butternut squash with something inside, and they would sew it afterwards with the vine of the palm tree, and they would cook it or roast it with that. So it was, even 1 thread was already significant. Fine. Okay, so different objects that a small amount is significant. Tzipoides kramim. This particular kosher locust called Tzipoides kramim, the bird of the vineyards. Bein chaya, bein mesa, whether it's alive, whether it's dead, kolshu, the smallest amount is significant. My Tzipoides kramim, they didn't know, it was a Hebrew word that they didn't know in Bavel. What is it? Amar Rav said, Rabbi translated to Aramaic. Palya biari. In Aramaic, it was called Palya biari. Now we don't know Aramaic, so it doesn't really help us very much. And Rashi also says he doesn't know. I mean, that's the name in Aramaic. In those days, it was called Palya biari. Fine. Amar Rabbi, where could you find it? Umishtakach, you could find it bedikla, on the palm tree. Dechad nevora, which only has 1 vine growing around it. So they cut off the branches, so it's like it leaves a bit of a hole on the palm tree. and then there's like this vine, these thin things growing around the palm tree, and slowly layers and layers and layers cover up the part that you cut. So first it was just a fresh cut, and then just one layer grows. So the hole isn't really covered so much. So this locust rests very much in that hole, which is only covered with one vine. What healing does it help for? It helps a person to become smart. How? If a person is not so smart, he cuts it in half to its length. He eats the right half. Upalga the small in the left half. Ramila, he puts it in a copper pipe. V'chasim lein, he seals it b'shitin gushpanki, with 60 seals. So Rashi says it's a guzma. It really means many seals. Many seals. V'tali lein, he hangs it be'ira the smaller on his left arm. Now, a lot of lefts over here. The left half on your left arm, you can get confused. V'simonach, if you want to remember how to do it right, it says like this: Leiv chacham liyaminui. One who's already smart, his heart is on his right side. But the one who isn't smart yet, the smile is on his left side. Now this person obviously isn't smart yet, because he's doing a remedy in order to become smart. So therefore he should do everything with the left side. V'chakim, kama the boy. He'll be able to become smart as much as he wants. The gomer kama the boy, he'll be able to learn to cover ground as much as he wants. But after all this, then take out all those seals, take the second half and eat it as well. The Eloi, if you're not going to eat it, you may lose all of what you learned. Maybe forget it. So therefore, this is the thing. Find the separate crumb, cut it in half, eat half, take the other half, put it in this copper pipe, seal it, hang it on your left arm, then learn, then try to think about things, then open it up after you finished and eat up the rest so you'll remember what you learned then. Fine? Okay. Fine. Rabbi Yehuda says that if you remove a non-kosher locust, a live one, it's also also because the smallest amount can be used as a pet for a child. The Tanakh says you're not allowed to. My time, you're not allowed to give a child something not kosher. He might eat it if he'll die, or if it's alive, maybe he might bite into it and eat it, and you're giving him something not kosher. So therefore, don't give it to him. Says in 1 second. A kosher grasshopper while it's alive, are you allowed to eat? Now, there's no issue of Evim and Achai. Because Evim and Achai is only by something which needs to be shechted. This does not have to be shechted, there's no issue of Evim and Achai. But it's disgusting when it's alive. And you're not allowed to eat things that are disgusting, midrabanan, based on a pasuk. And you're not allowed to cause a child to do the same. So, Iachi, if the problem is he might eat it, Torah Nami, then a kosher one is also a problem. How do we know that it's a problem to eat a live kosher locust? Rav Kana was standing in front of Rav learning. He has a certain type of locust which is kosher called shashiva. And while he was learning, he was like fiddling around with this locust. And while he was fiddling around, he did like this. No, as he's playing around, he put it like this. And he's listening to the shir. As you have students, that fiddle around with things. So he put it next to his mouth. They said, Rav, Shakli, take it away. They shouldn't say, they shouldn't suspect you that you're eating it. And what's the problem? And you're making yourself disgusted. You're eating something which is disgusting. So we see that there's an issur to eat a live kosher locust. And you're not allowed to give a child a issur d'rabbanan either. So how come you're allowed to let him play with a kosher locust? So really the answer is, typically, they're not going to eat it when it's alive. It might die. Ela dilma mayis ve'ochil. If it's going to die, he's going to eat it. So if it's kosher, it's fine. If it's not kosher, it's not fine. That's what Tanakama holds. Okay, so what is Rabbi Yehuda going to say about it? Rabbi Yehuda says, no. Imayis, if a child's pet dies, he doesn't eat it. Katan mispat sovitli. He's going to cry. He's going to mourn. He's going to hug it. He's not going to eat it. So you're not afraid that he's going to eat the dead grasshopper that you just played with? No, it's not going to happen. And there was nothing to worry about. They could give him a non-kosher locust. Fine. So we spoke in this Mishnah about a bunch of different objects in a box, that if I removed it, I carried it, and then I remembered one object after another, I'm not chayiv for each. And then we spoke about garden seeds, that according to everyone, the size is even less than a dried fig. According to Tanakam, it's a bit less. According to Rabbi Yehuda and Masechta, then typically it'll be 5 seeds. And for specific ones, cucumber, butternut squash, beans, then 2 is already significant. So we see earlier in the mission that for fertilizing, one vegetable is already significant. It says, yeah, once it grew. But if it didn't grow yet, you have a small seed, you don't carry out 1 small seed. You look at the way it's now, you would carry minimum 5 or 2, or according to Tanakama, a larger amount. The Gemara brought a few other things that a small amount is also significant. Different types of threads that they would use for traps, for nets, or to start off the sewing, or for baskets. They would use the leaves of palm trees. And then speaking about the seeds, the Brisa says it depends on why you're taking it out, or what's the custom in your place. If the custom is to eat, then typically people wouldn't save it to eat it. They would feed it to chazer, so 1 is already significant. If it's for planting, then 2 or 5, depending on the type, is significant. If it's for a fuel to burn on it, then it's like any fuel, like any wood, to cook, to fry a bit of an egg, a size of a dried fig of an egg. Fine. Then we spoke about the locust. So this particular type of locust called Tziporis Akramim, which if you cut it in half, you eat a half, you put the other half in a copper pipe, you seal it, you hang it on your left arm, and you learn then, and try to think about things then, you're going to know everything. And then after you finish, open it up and eat it, so you won't forget. Then we spoke about playing with live locusts. So Tanakama says only kosher, because it might die and you'll eat it. If it's alive, it'll be a problem even if it's kosher, because Baal Teshakts. But we're afraid it might die. Says Rabbi, no. And so therefore only kosher, not kosher is a problem. Says Rabbi, no. A child does not eat a dead pet. And therefore, if it died, he'll cry. He's not going to eat it. That's fine. Okay.